The Toronto Raptors currently sit below 500 following a playoff appearance last season with plenty of talent on the roster. Let us know in the comments whether the Toronto Raptors should take apart this core or keep it intact. Before we get into that, before we get into that, shout out to this user right here for a dope comment on one of our recent videos. But now, Matt, let's get to the meat of this argument here.
Let's do it.
Should the Raptors in this front office blow up this core? Should they keep it intact?
No, I think you should keep it intact. I think this is a core that, at least with like Siakam and some of the guys, remembers the championship they won back with Kawhi Leonard. This is a group
Seems like
that
forever ago, don't it?
It does, but they're still super young. I mean, Siakam is still young. Fred VanVleet is still fairly young, and you obviously have the young stars like OG, you have Scotty Barnes, guys like that, Gary Trent Jr. And this is a good core in that sense. They made it to the playoffs. They showed what they could do in that ability, and they actually gave the 76ers a good run for their money. And I think you look at that great conversation we had with Julia about the Chicago Bulls, who are actually sitting around the same area as the Raptors.
Yeah.
And she believes that front office is sticking with that group of guys, and they want to stay consistent. I see no reason why you would want to blow up this group, especially because, if anything, they might have a little bit more upside in the long term than the Bulls, just on age in those sort of situations.
Sure.
So yeah, I think Toronto, let them play. Maybe make some small piece trades, but I think keep this core, this group of like four or five guys, keep them together.
I think it's time to push the chips into the middle of the table and go all in with this group. Obviously Nick Nurse is, I believe, one of the top head coaches in the National Basketball Association. There's no issue with the coaching on this roster, but yet this Raptors team, which as we both know, has plenty of talent on it.
Yes, it does.
They're bottom 5 in total points per game this season. They're bottom 2 in 3-point shooting this season, which really doesn't make sense when you look at the talent again on this roster. That tells me that this group, as currently constructed, just doesn't really fit together. And we've seen it now for a couple of seasons now. We've seen at least a postseason series last year against the Philadelphia 76ers. It's time to move this thing around. And if you're the Toronto Raptors, you're in an enviable position. You mentioned the Chicago Bulls. You're in an enviable position, at least more so than the Bulls, because you have more than a couple really attractive trade pieces. You mentioned a couple of them, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam would probably be the most attractive, probably the hardest to get by another team, and also Scotty Barnes, who you just drafted last year, but there's rumors circulating that he might also be in the market and that teams would be interested. One guy I'd be looking at if I was the Toronto Raptors, that's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, sitting out there balling, averaging over 30 points a game in Oklahoma City. That would be, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
I mentioned that earlier. Didn't even realize
we have top 5 Canadian players of all time. I know I had Shai on mine.
Yeah, I
had him.
That just gives more even validity to that point. That bring Shai back to Toronto, bring him home. I think that would do wonders for this Raptors group. Having him be kind of the ball handler in that backcourt. Hopefully you keep one of those two wings in Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby, and you build from there. Because again, we've seen this team. We've seen enough of this group here together, I believe. And again, the last time the Raptors, made this similar bet, it resulted in the championship. If I'm Masai Ujiri, I'm calling about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander before the deadline.
I mean, he makes big moves, and he's not afraid to, make a crazy, what appears to be crazy at the time, move if he thinks it's going to be an upside. The one thing I have a problem with SGA is I just don't know what the upside is for OKC to trade him. Obviously, they are in a power position. You get some good players back, but they want picks because they're going all in on Bronny. Because
do you need picks? Because they got enough. They got more than enough.
They got enough, but I think it's a situation where there's never enough. You can never have too many picks. I mean, they have. That's been their game plan. Eventually, they have to turn that into players, but I don't know if that is the time. And I said this last year when we talked about Toronto. I do think they're one player away, and if you can get that player through still keeping the core, I think that's what they're going to want to do. They'll probably end up having to trade a younger guy like a Scotty Barnes maybe to bring in that star player who's on maybe a lesser team.
Yeah.
But I still think that this core is solid, and I think Pascal Siakam, for example, is a guy that's earned his keep there, and you're not going to move him on. I think he's a great number 2, and they need to find that number 1, but I don't think that's going to require blowing up the team.
It's going to be tough. Again, we've seen enough of this core. I don't think this core is currently constructed with Pascal Siakam being the guy is enough to get out of a really tough Eastern Conference. They're not going to be better than the Bucks, Sixers probably, the Nets even, the Celtics obviously as well, who look like the best team in the East. That's just four teams right there. So let us know in the comments, should the Raptors keep this core together, or is it time to move on? Let us know in the comments. Shout out that boy Drake. Shout out to Six. We'll catch you next time with Simple Questions. Thanks for watching. Feel free to check out our other videos, and don't forget to smack that subscribe button down below while you're at it. Also, for more great and original content, head right over to bbmsports.com.